that Navy fighter jet plowing into an apartment complex, triggering a massive inferno. New information this morning about what caused the horrific crash, and ABC's David Curley has the very latest from the scene in Virginia Beach. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Paul. ABC News has learned new details about what may have caused this crash at noon yesterday. And also at daylight, we are learning new information about whether anybody lost their lives because of this jet crash.
Seconds after takeoff, something went terribly wrong. And just across the interstate,
oh, Jesus Christ,
the jet fell to the ground.
This is terrible.
We heard the plane flying.
And it was a lot louder than they normally are.
And it just looked basically like he dropped out of the sky.
This terrible, loud crash.
And then things started to explode.
This whole place is on fire.
And then the black smoke.
I could smell it.
The F-18 crashed into an apartment complex. You can see here the flaming tail in the courtyard of the buildings. Residents felt their walls shake, not knowing what was happening.
Ran out on the back porch and I seen the canopy of a plane and I've lost everything.
I seen the two guys parachute.
Oh, God, parachute.
Other residents walked outside to see pilots in their ejection seats in their backyards.
Conscious but barely conscious.
And pulled the Navy man to safety.
So I pulled my knife out and I cut him loose from his chair.
The pilot seen here on his way to the hospital apologized to residents.
And the pilot said, "I'm sorry for destroying your house." And I just bent down and I touched him. I was like, it's okay. It really is. Are you okay?
This was a training flight with the student pilot in the front seat. ABC News has learned from a military official that the pilots experienced a fuel leak on takeoff and immediately shut down one of the two engines. They started to dump fuel to lighten the aircraft to fly on one engine. But something went wrong, and the pilots were forced to eject just moments before impact.
This is a huge mess.
Rescuers searched all afternoon and into the night looking for victims.
And here's the good news. They thought that there were 3 people who were unaccounted for. Well, there may have been some miscommunication. They actually believe that everybody that was on the list of that apartment building has been accounted for. So remarkably, at this hour, no deaths associated with this crash, 9 injuries, including the 2 pilots, everybody in decent condition, Dan.
That really is astonishing when you see those pictures. David Curley, thank you for your reporting this morning. And we are lucky to have with us this morning 2 men who were right there when that plane went down, Pat Cavanaugh and George Pilkington. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
So, George, let me start with you. You saw the plane go down. Can you describe what happened?
Well, it actually had flown directly over my truck as I was coming down Bird Neck Road, and it was dumping fuel as it was driving over top of me. And with the nose up and bottom down and the engines were screaming, it sounded like they were trying to get this thing back up into the air.
Engines screaming. Now, Pat, you were in your apartment, which is part of this complex. You heard the explosions, you ran outside, you saw a pilot on his back. Can you describe for us what you saw and what you did in that moment?
When I went out the back door, I saw the pilot on the ground. I went over and to see if he was injured. He was bleeding from the nose a little bit. I'm retired rescue, so I checked for obvious open wounds, broken limbs. Then I tried to go back inside, but when I bent down next to him, he apologized to me for crashing into our apartment complex, and I told him, "Son, don't worry about it. You're alive, I'm alive, and we'll get you out of here as soon as we can."
Did he seem dazed in that moment, or was he completely coherent?
He was in shock. He was just staring into space. He wasn't moving. His parachute was still hooked to the top of the building. And at that time, all of a sudden, the black smoke started to come over the top of the building. We knew we had to get him out of there quick. I heard secondary explosions going off. I didn't know if it was fuel tanks, ordnance, or the gas lines. But I know we knew we had to move quick. So we grabbed him, picked him up, moved him to further down the parking lot. And at that time, the neighbors started to come outside, and we had to we had to evacuate the building.
And George, let me just jump in for a second. George, if you don't mind, I just want to, George and Pat, I just want to ask you both, what is your emotional state this morning? Are you angry that this crash happened in your home? Are you relieved that nobody was seriously injured? Can you, and let me direct this at you, Pat. How do you feel this morning?
I'm not upset. I'm glad nobody's died in this incident. It could have been a lot worse. I'm proud of the two pilots who did their best to bring the plane down where they did. I'm just glad nobody died in this terrible incident.
We're going to have to leave it there, and we echo your sentiments. Thank you very much, both of you, Pat Kavanaugh and George Pilkington. Thank you, gentlemen.